What do you think is the most brutal dictator in history? If your answer is Kim Jong-un, Joseph Stalin, or Genghis Khan, you are right. However, there is another person who surpassed them all in brutality. A dictator whose regime killed 500,000 people, declared war on America, and claimed victory the next day. This man declared himself the King of Scotland and bestowed upon himself the title His Excellency President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. This is Fractustv, and today we will be discussing Idi Amin, one of the cruelest figures in history. Please subscribe to our channel. In the pictures, you can see Uganda when it was a colony of Great Britain. At that time, the country enjoyed peace and made progress in almost all areas. A significant portion of the population was content. However, during that period, local politicians initiated a major national liberation campaign, convincing the uneducated population that the British were exploiting them. They promised that if they could expel the British from their lands, everyone would become rich. Such slogans resonated with a large part of the population, and hatred towards the British slowly grew, as we have already mentioned. At that time, the country was on the path to prosperity, and there was a belief that Uganda would become a much richer and more successful country without British rule. Finally, in 1962, Britain granted independence to Uganda. The long-awaited freedom was expected to bring unprecedented wealth and happiness to the country, but everything turned out to be the opposite. The people who came to power had no intention of taking care of the country and its citizens. All they wanted was power and wealth. After the departure of the British from Uganda, Milton Obote became the Prime Minister of the country, and his primary military ally was Commander Idi Amin. Obote carried out significant repression through Idi Amin and his soldiers. With Idi Amin's assistance, Milton Obote orchestrated a military coup that overthrew the country's president, Mutesa II. He declared himself president and appointed Idi Amin as commander-in-chief. Uganda received support from the Soviet Union, which provided weapons and military equipment. Obote and Idi Amin then sold the equipment they received to rebel forces in the jungles of the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, earning a substantial amount of money. Amin was a huge man. Born in 1924 in Koboko, Uganda, he was raised by his mother, who noticed the child's indomitable temperament and desire for power. She first took him to Kriviv and then sent him to the army. Amin, a member of the small Kakwa ethnic group in northwestern Uganda, received little formal education and joined the King's African Rifles of the British Colonial Army in 1946 as an assistant cook. He was one of the few Ugandan soldiers promoted to an officer rank before Ugandan independence in 1962. He became closely associated with the new nation's Prime Minister and President, Milton Obote. It was after this that Amin's cruel behavior began to manifest. According to various sources, Amin often used his bare hands to decapitate his opponents and gouge out their eyes. Throughout the latter half of the 1960s, a rift developed between Idi Amin and Milton Obote. Part of the cause for this was their different political affiliations. In January 1971, Obote traveled to Singapore for a congress. Amin took advantage of this and orchestrated a military coup in the country. In 1972, Amin informed the people that Allah had appeared to him in a dream and ordered the expulsion of Asians from the country. These Asians were primarily involved in industry, road construction, factories, and trade. 50,000 Asians were given 90 days to leave Uganda. Their properties and businesses were seized by Amin and his officers. All of this, of course, led to the collapse of the Ugandan economy. After Amin's came, brutal repressions began in Uganda. His regime killed up to 10,000 people in just 5 months. And sometimes the death toll was so high that they couldn't bury all the corpses and resorted to throwing them into the river. Amin ruthlessly persecuted and killed anyone who did not support the military coup. After expelling Azalibe from the country, Amin started persecuting Christians and initiated a religious war. Priest Janani Luem tried to alleviate the situation, but he was soon accused of arms trading and killed by the military. In 1975, Idi Amin declared himself president for life. In the same year, this Ugandan geopolitical genius declared war on the United States of America and, the next day, announced that the war was over, with Uganda claiming victory and held a massive party in the evening. Through a combination of populist charm and brutal violence, backed by a vast police state, he ruled Uganda for 8 years until his strategic blunders led to his downfall. In the final years of his reign, Idi Amin survived numerous assassination attempts. His grip on power weakened, and the number of those loyal to him diminished. During Amin's rule, Uganda became one of the poorest countries in Africa, with 65% of the GDP spent on military maintenance. Agriculture and industry were in deep crisis. In 1978, Amin invaded Tanzania and captured a portion of its territory. After Tanzania organized a counteroffensive, Idi Amin realized that Uganda would likely lose the war. In an attempt to save face, he offered to settle the conflict with a boxing match between himself and Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere. Predictably, the Tanzanian president ignored the message. On April 11, 1979, Kampala was captured and Idi Amin fled the country. The following years saw him finding protection in Saudi Arabia. Idi Amin spent the rest of his life there. He died of kidney failure in 2003 and was buried in Ruwais Cemetery in Jeddah. In the end, Amin's regime was responsible for the deaths of 300,000 to 500,000 people, including 2,000 killed by Amin himself. What is even more interesting is that he ended his life without being held accountable for any of his crimes. After Idi Amin, Milton Obote returned to Uganda and repression began once again, with Idi Amin's supporters being oppressed and killed. During Obote's 5-year rule, approximately 500,000 people were killed, and over 1 million fled the country. Thank you for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.